Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samich Amud Aleph, starting with Nun Tes Amud Beis, 9 lines from the bottom. The Gemara had taught us when you have a city that is Shel Rabim, even if it's a city Shel Rabim V'naases Shel Yachid, and then was sold to a Yachid, nonetheless, such a city, the Chachamim were concerned that if you would make one Eruv with Shituf Mivois, enabling the carrying within the entire city, then there are people who make a mistake and carry in a Rishus HaRabim. And therefore, they said you must set aside some part of that city separately from this sheet from Mivois. As a heker, then people will then understand that it's the Eruv that's permitting them to then carry in that city. We learned also in the Bryce on the top of the Amud. However, if you have even a city Shel Rabim, but it has only one entrance, one major entrance with one road, and not two entrances, then that city is Ma'arvin es Kula, since that city has the road only entering it from one side and goes to a dead end on the other side. It's not like a Rishus HaRabim. And therefore you can Ma'arvin es Kula. Says the Gemara, Boy mine Rav Ami bar Ada harfano me Rabba. He asked the following question: Sulam mikanu Pesach mikan mahu. If you have on one side of the city an entrance, but on the other side of the road is a sulam. The sulam is on the wall, and it also has a sulam, a ladder on the other side of the wall, enabling a person to then climb up the wall and then climb down the other side. Is that considered to be a Pesach or not? The difference would be, of course, if it's a Pesach, then you would have to then leave out a area of that city, so then you can go ahead and then enable people to walk within the city itself. But you cannot Ma'arvin es Kula. Says the Gemara, Amar Lei, Rav Ami bar Ada, who asked the question to Rabba. Rabba answered him, Hochi Amar Rav. Rav said, Sulam Taras Pesach Alov. The Sulam has a din of a Pesach. And therefore, yes, you would have to then be Meshayer, another area of the city, in order to then enable the rest of the city to then make the sheet of Mivois and carry within it. Omar lu Rav Nachman lo tatzisule. Don't pay attention to Rabbah, who said in the name of Rab that it's like a Pesach. The Sulam will have the din of a Pesach as an entranceway. Because Hochi Omar Rav Ada bar Rav Ada Omar Rav. Because Rav Ada said in the name of Rav, Sulam Taras Pesach Alav, Vit Taras Mechitza Alav. In other words, Rabbah only heard the first part of the statement, but Rav said two parts of the statement. He said that it's a Pesach, and it's also a Taras Mechitza Alav, meaning Lekula. Sometimes it has a din of a Pesach, and sometimes it has a din of a Mechitza, depending on what is the way that will be Mekil. Taras Mechitza Alav Kida Moron. It would have the din of a Mechitza in the previous case that we had just mentioned when it comes to a Sulam. There we would say it's like a Mechitza, and therefore the city really only has one entrance, whereby you can go ahead and Ma'arvin es Kula. V'taras Pesach alav, like the following: Besulam she bein shtei chatzos. If you have two chatzeros, now chatzeros, in order to then enjoin the two of them together, there has to be some sort of entrance way between one and the next. So it says if you have a sulam between the two chatzeros, Ratzu echad ma'arev, ratzu shnai ma'arev. You can have the option of either be ma'arev, each one independently, or you can enjoin them to be one eruv. So you see over here that the sulam has the din even as a Pesach, enabling them to then make an eruv together. Ask the Gemara, Umi Amar Rav Nachman Hochi. Did Rav Nachman really say, don't listen to that statement that Rabbah made? The Ha'omar Rav Nachman Rashu, because Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, Anshe Chotzer ve'anshe merpeses sheshachachu v'lo irvu. If you have people of the Chotzer and people of the merpeses is a balcony. Here we have a situation where you have a balcony which is on the second floor of a building that really has a ladder that's going from the balcony into the chutzner. So if they are not combining, like we know, all people who are joining the chutzner have to make Erev Chatzeros together to enable everybody to carry in the chutzner. If one resident is not making the Erev Chatzeros, then it prohibits everybody else from then carrying. So over here, we have a situation where you have the balcony, the merpeses, the people that did not make an Eruv together with the people of the Chatzeros. So it says, Im yesh lefonea daka arbo, eino oiseres v'im lav oiseres. On top of Daf Samech Amud Aleph. So Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, if it has a small doorway that is going to be a low entranceway to the chutzner, that means from the balcony to the chutzner, of 4 tfachim, then it's not going to be oiser the people of the chutzner to then carry in the chutzner. However, if not, it doesn't have this small doorway of 4 tfachim, it will, yes, oiser. So we see then that over here, then it has a din of Pesach l'chumra, because over here it's saying that they were able to then be part of the chutzner, and they didn't make an eruv with the other people in the chutzner, thereby prohibiting everybody in the chutzner to carry. So we see not like the way Rav Nachman said before. Here we see Rav Nachman says as din of a Taras Pesach, whereas before he said don't listen to Rabbah, because after all, the din is that Rav had said that it's lakula, either sometimes it's Taras Mechitza and sometimes it's Taras Pesach. So the Gemara questions, did Rav Nachman really say that? Says the Gemara, no, hachab mayaskinon bedeloi gavoya mer pesach asara. That indeed we can say that Rav Nachman did say, don't listen to that version that Rabbah gave in the name of Rav, because you could, yes, go lakula when it comes to the sulam. Over here, the reason why it sounds like he's going l'chumra is because, not because the sulam, it's because the merpeset itself is not asar tfachim high from the chutzner, whereby it is part of the chutzner. V'iloi gavoya merpeza asar, asked the Gemara, ki ka'ovi daka mayhavi. If it's not asar tfachim, it doesn't have a din of mechitza, so it's part, this whole merpeza is part of the chutzner, then how does a small entranceway, a small doorway of 4 tfachim going to help? After all, we said just before, if there's a small doorway, a daka arbo, then it's not going to be oiseh the people in the chutzner to carry. So how will that make a difference? Here we have a situation where the merpesis is less than asar tfachim, it's part of the chutzner. Answers the Gemara b'migofefes. We're talking about where you have an area that surrounds the merpesis with mechitza. Ad asa eser amos, that's 10 amos long. The kivan da avid daka istaluk le mehacha. And if you therefore make this small 4 tfachim high entranceway, that doorway itself will then show that the people in their merpeses are separate from the people in the chutzner, and therefore they're not going to then oiser the people of the chutzner from carrying. Says the Gemara, Omar Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel. Another statement that Rav Yehuda made of Shmuel. Koisel sheritzofu b'sulamos. If you have a wall that is lined with sulamos, with ladders, afilu b'yeser me'eser, even beyond 10 amos. Normally 10 amos is considered to be a breach in a wall, but here we're talking about where there's lined with ladders on both sides of the wall. Taras mechitza alov. So Shmuel is telling us that it's considered to be having the din of a mechitza. Rami le Rav Meruna le Rav Yehuda b'ma'atzar to the Rav Chanina. He asked in the pressing, the wine press of the Bei Chanina, the following question on this din of Shmuel. Mi Omar Shmuel Taras mechitza alov. Did Shmuel say that when you have then ladders that are lined up that are going to be across the wall on both sides, it's going to be lining this wall with ladders on both sides, that's going to be a din of a mechitza? V'ha'omar Rav Nachman Mar Shmuel Anshe marpeses v'anshe chotzer sheshachachu v'lo irvu im yesh lefonei daka arba eino iseres v'im lav iseres. He brought the same din that we saw before, that when you have a merpeses that comes off of a chotzer, and the entrance to the merpeses is through a ladder into the chotzer, there we say that if they have indeed a little door of 4 tefachim high, then they're not going to oise the people in the chotzer from carrying. But if not, then they will oise. So you see from here that the ladder itself has the din of a pesach l'chumra. Answers the Gemara the same shakel of atar that we had just before. Hachab mayaskinon the loy gavoya merpeses asara. We're talking about when the merpes is not 10 tefachim high, it doesn't have a din of mechitza, therefore it's part of the chotzer. And that's why they're going to oiser the people from carrying in the chotzer, not because of the sulam. Ask the Gemara, v'loy gavoya merpeses asara ki yavid dake mayhave. So if it's not going to be then asar tefachim, then who cares that you have this little door of 4 tefachim? Answers the Gemara, megufefes ad eser amos. We have an area that's going to surround, with walls surrounding the merpeses, and that has 10 tefachim high walls. And therefore, the kiven the avidak istaluki istalik mehocha, by having the 4 tefachim high entranceway, that itself will show that this area is separate from the bnei achotzer, whereby they're not going to the oiser on the bnei achotzer. Says the Gemara Vaita, the following incident: Hanu Kakoinoi, the osul l'kemid of Yosef. The people of Kakoinoi. This was a city that was considered to be a city shel rabim. Either it was always a city shel rabim, or it was a city shel rabim that was nase shel yochid. But nonetheless, a city shel rabim, we know, has the requirement that it has to be mishayer, an area, so that it's going to then be enabled to then be ma'arev the rest of the city. If not, then we said the Chachamim are concerned that the people will make a mistake and carry in the Rishus Rabbim, whereby they would be also to carry with 1 eruv. So therefore they said if you make a shiur and make a separate area from this city, then people will then know that it's the eruv that permits them to carry. So says the Gemara, the people of Kakonoi came to Rav Yosef and they asked him to then provide somebody to then provide them an eruv. Omru le havlon gavra de le'arev lon mosin. Provides with somebody to then make a proper eruv in our town, in our city. Again, this is a city that's shel rabim. Omar leila Abaye. Rav Yosef said to his Talmud Abaye, zil arev lehu. Go and make an eruv for this people, the bnei Kakonoi. V'chozi deloy matzav chas alo b'beit midrasha, and see to it that the people in the Beis HaMedrash do not complain about such an eruv. Ozol chazel lahanu batei depsichelinaro. The Gemara now tells over how Abaye's thought process was to come to then make this eruv. So Ozol, he went chazel lahanhu batei depsichelinaro. He saw that there was a row of houses in the area of Kakonoi that were facing the water. It was waterfront houses, and they did not have an entranceway to the chotzer behind them, to the city behind them. Omar, he said to himself, Hani lahave shiur lamata. This will be perfect to be the area that's going to be designated as separate from the city. Hodar, afterwards, Omar, he reconsidered, and he said, Ein ma'arvin es kulatnan. The Mishnah says you can't me'arvin the entire city. And from there he wants to make a diuk, that since you cannot me'arv from the whole city, it must be that you could have the potential to me'arv from the whole city. Michlal di'i boy le'aruve mati ma'arve. If he could, he could potentially, yes, ma'arv the whole thing. And that's the type of shiur that a person then needs to set aside, that he has potential to then, yes, include an entire city. So these houses that are in the front of the sea, in front of the water, but do not have an entrance to the city, don't have access to the city to then be considered to be 1 eruv. So I cannot use them, he said to himself, to be included as the shiur, as the separate area from the city. Elo, rather, what should I do? Iaviluhu kavi the boy le'aruve der chalonas mati ma'arve. He said to himself, what I'll do is I'll make windows because if the windows are arba tfachim, then that will be considered to be sufficient to then have them as being a connection to the Bnei Ha'ir, and therefore that would be enough as windows, that if he potentially wanted to then make an eruv between the two of them, he could do so. Afterwards, again, Abai was reconsidering in his thought process, and he said, no. The Rabbi Baravua Ma'arev lo lekula mechuza arsiyasa. He said that Rabbi Baravua, he made an eruv in the entire area of Mechuzah. Now, Mechuzah was also a Ir Shel Rabim, and he did so with neighborhoods by neighborhoods. So he made one big eruv, mishum pira de beituri, because of the ditches that they would put date pits inside of it for the shvarim, for the bulls to then eat. The kol chad v'chad havishir lechavrei. Each one was considered to be separate, had a separate area on its own. So therefore, they were able to then be separated, having this area of shiur. Even though if they wanted, however, to make an eruv together, they would not be able to. So you see from this scenario, mechuzah, that you don't have to have the potential to go ahead and me'arev everything. So therefore, I can still then go ahead and use the other part as the area that's going to be considered to be independent from this eruv without having the access to it. Hodamar loidami. Afterwards, Abaye reconsidered and said, no, it's not comparable to the case of mechuzah. That indeed, maybe you do need to have access to the city in order to then be able to then make it its shiur. Because hasam iboy leuve der gagois v'hani lo me'arve. Hilchag na'avdin kave. They said no, because in the case of mechuzah, they could, yes, ma'arev with via the gagois, if they wanted to. So it is potentially possible to then have access to it. And therefore, he says, I have to also have access to then those waterfront houses. How do I do that? I'll have to make windows. Hoda Omar, finally, Abai reconsidered again. And he said to himself, Kave nami loy boy, I don't need to make windows. Why? Because Da'ahu beit ha'tivno, Da'havale lemarbar pumpedisa mi pumpedisa. Veshavi shiur lepumpedisa. Pumpedisa was a city shel Rabim, and there was somebody over there that had a beit tivna, an area where there was where they stored wheat, and over there, including that area that stored wheat, it was excluded from needing to have an eruv, and that itself was considered to be something that was therefore enough to then make the people of Medusa be ma'arev in the entire city. So you see that you don't have to have, let's say, access to another area, and therefore these beachfront houses, these houses that are facing the water, that don't have an entranceway to the city, are going to be sufficient to make it a separate area from this city. Omar, and then Abai said to himself in conclusion, Hainu da Omar li mar. This is what Rav Yosef was saying to me when he said, Chazid lo metzavcha alo b'bei midrasha. See to it that the people in the Beis HaMedrash do not complain upon what you're doing, that you make the eruv proper. Take a look at Tosfos. Tosfos says over here, what is this nekuda that he was alluding to? Says Tosfos, Hainu da Omar le Chazid lo metzavcha she'im haya mezkikam la'asois kive. Because if indeed they would be required to make walls, windows, then al chinam hayu soisrim es bateim. It would be for no reason that they'd have to then ruin their homes. So therefore, this is what Rav Yosef was alluding to when he told Abaye to make the eruv in the proper way. Says Gemara Vayter, quoting the Mishnah, Ella im kain asa chutza lo ki ir chadasha. The Mishnah says that you can make this shiur, the separate area, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, the size of the city of Chadasha, which had 50 people who were residing in it. Tanya Omar Rabbi Yehuda, the Brisa says in the Rabbi Yehuda, Ir achas ha'isa Yehuda, there was one city in the area of Yehuda. The Chadasha shwa, and her name, that area, that city was called Chadasha. V'hoyu bo be-chamishim diyurim. And there are 50 residents there. Anoshim, v'noshim, v'taf. Men, women, and children. Ubo hayu misharim chacham. And in that city of Chadasha, the chachamim ascertained that's big enough to be a shiur to the big city that is next to it, to enable the big city to also then make its eruv and then go ahead and carry within it. Iboilu asked the Gemara, Chadasha mahu. What would be about the city of Chadash itself? Do you need to make an eruv there to permit people to carry? In other words, Chadasha itself, we want to know, since Chadasha, do you need to make a separate eruv for the entire area without right? Can you make an eruv without a shear or not? Says the Gemara, Chadasha, you're asking about Chadasha. We know that Chadasha was a small city that is next to the bigger city. And we said that the small city of Chadasha was used as a shiur for the bigger city. So ask the Gemara, Ki hechidi ihi havia shiur legedolah. Just like this was, the city of Chadasha was made as a shiur, as a small area, b'fnei atzmoi, so that the big city next to it can go ahead and carry within it. Then gedolah nami havia shiur lektana. Then the big city would be a shiur for the city of Chadasha. So certainly then that wouldn't be necessary to make a separate shiur. That would be that city itself. You can go ahead and make an eruv in the entire city of Chadasha. Ella, the question was different. Ke'ein Chadashma. If you have another area that is 50 residents in that city, what would be the din? In other words, a small city like that is not next to a big city, does that need another shiur, or does that self? Can you go ahead and ma'arv an entire city? So the Gemara brings the machlekes, Rav Huna, Rav Yehuda, Chad amar boi shiur, v'chad amar loi boi shiur. One says that you would need to make a shiur, even though it's a small city of 50, and therefore, although it was considered to be a city shel rabim, and it was nasis liyochid, so here, maybe since it's so small, like 50, it would not require shiur, but the other mandamar says, Chad amar loi boi shiur. So one says you still need to make a shiur, and the other says you don't need to make a shiur. This is the machlokes. Rav Shimon Oimer Gimel Chatzeiros. The Mishnah quotes the more lenient opinion of Rav Shimon, who argues on Rabbi Yehuda and says the shiur of that small area doesn't have to even be 50 residents, but it can be, in fact, 2 Chatzeiros, 3 Chatzeiros that have 2 cities within each Chatzer. That's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah. 3 chatzeres with 2 cities in each one, with 2 houses rather in each one. Rav Chama bar Guya Marav halakhi Rabbi Shimon, and halacha indeed is like Rabbi Shimon, that is enough to have 3 chatzeres with 2 houses in each one, and that's going to be then considered to be a shiur in order to then enable the city next to it to then make its eruv b'fnei atzmoi. Rabbi Yitzchak said, afilu bayis echod v'chotzer achas. Rabbi Yitzchak, the Amora, said that even one bias and one chotzer. Now, an Amora cannot argue on a Tana. And we have a machlokes Tanoim in our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda said an area called Chadasha of 50 residents. Rabbi Shimon said an area that is 3 chatzeres with 2 batim within each one. And here you have Rabbi Yosef saying even more makil, 1 chotzer with 1 house. Ask the Gemara, Chotzer achas hagadaitoch. He said, Bayis echad v'chotzer achas. 1 bayis and 1 chotzer. Ask the Gemara, 1 chotzer? That means a chotzer without a bayis. That's not even a residency. The Gemara said, no. What do you mean to say is Ela ema bayis echad v'chotzer achas. So it is a bayis inside of 1 chotzer, but still that's very makil, and you cannot be arguing on the Tanoim in our Mishnah. Omar le Abayi. So therefore, Abayi asked Rav Yosef. He said, what was Rabbi Yitzchak's, where does he know this from? Did Rabbi Yitzchak Gemara? Did he have a tradition that he learned from his Rabbeim, that Be'etzem, this is another Tana? Or was he saying it from Svara? So Rav Yosef says back to Abaye, my nafka lamino. What does it make a difference to us? Hare, the halacha is nifsak ke Rabbi Shimon. And therefore, whether he learns it from tradition or doesn't from Svara, it makes no difference that he says that it's 1 bias in one chotzer. Omar lei, Abai responds to Rav Yosef, Gemara Gamur Zemura Setehei. He says over a tradition, and it should be like a zemer. In other words, without a proper understanding behind that which he's stating. And therefore we need to understand, was he coming to say it's a tradition, or was he saying it is svara on his own?